we start the program. Yeah. So a very good evening to all of you, and it is a pleasure to see such bright stalwarts in one frame. I am privileged to be organizing this program on behalf of Academy of HRD. Somehow, every year we are planning multiple things, but I think this occasion comes to our subconscious and tells us that this is one event that you should not miss. And I'm personally blessed to be hosting this particular kind of a memorial for about 3-4 times in a good, beautiful manner, which goes down to my memory. So I, on behalf of Academy of HRD, welcome all the stalwart dignitaries, faculty colleagues, lovely scholars that we have, and all our dear friends. It is indeed a pleasure to have celebrating 21st January, as this day is special not only for Academy of HRD, but every HR professional in general. As we join our hands and pay tribute to our guru, late Professor Udai Pareek, on his birth anniversary, I think the 97th birth anniversary, as Dr. Rao posted early morning, and we could recall the number as well. So way back in 1974, Professor Pareek, along with Professor T.V. Rao, laid foundation to the first HR department in L&T and initiated a movement for development of HR professionals. We are thankful that they did that, and all of us are right now linked up together. So they fondly considered the father of Indian HRD movement, and we owe a lot to them. Academy of HRD has been blessed by both of them, along with stalwarts like Dr. Pestinji with us, that this organization has been working on the research and innovation from the last 30 years. So we're thankful they laid the foundation, and we try and carry on the best way possible. So since 1974, if we would just take a nostalgic view back, Professor Pareek continued to lead, guide, innovate, and inspire the HR professionals. He was an excellent faculty, a researcher, a behavioral scientist, an institutional builder, author, and above all, a very humble person. I remember very few meetings with him, but I am mesmerized by those memories, because in a very short duration, he would teach you something which is phenomenally difficult to understand otherwise. As a student, I enjoyed reading his books, and as an employee, as an assistant to him, I loved working with him. So I think humility is one area which stays longer in my mind, because the kind of work that he did was exceptional. But yeah, the humble approach with which he met everybody, nobody could understand that, yeah, this is the kind of work that they do. So for this year, we chose the theme to be evidence-based management under the due guidance of Yogi Shriram Saab also. And when I look back into a lot of papers and the work that Professor Pareek has done, he led by example and became a guiding light himself for evidence-based management functioning, for scientific research, for experimentation and innovation. The two stalwarts we have with us today are also indeed a live example of leading innovative and scientific research in practice. And both of them also have direct experiences of working with Professor Pareek. I welcome Shri Yogi Shriram Saab. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. His name does not require an introduction, but I would like to add on that he's advisor Group HR to CEO and MD at L&T. Having 44 years of experience of leading and building performance-enabled organizations, he has a lot in his kitty for us to learn from. I would also categorically highlight that he built a high potential program with assessments of leaders over 2 decades and other kind of HR policies, particularly in the field of leadership development and talent management. A wonderful person, and I'm sure a great institutional builder in himself. It will be a pleasure to hear to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have with us Professor Keith D'Souza, currently associated with SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. Thank you so much, sir, for joining in. Sitting in Academy, I see the lot of work that has gone by, and so, like you've been the foundation and pillar for so much of work that is currently being done. We keep on listening from the other scholars about how blessed they are to have you as guide. So I'm sure I take the opportunity to bow down on the kind of work that you have done, and yet manage to be a very humble and an approachable HR professional, sir. So Keith carries over 3 decades of experiences in teaching and academic administration, research and consulting in management, a first executive director for AHRD, and also a founding member to National HRD Network. So with 2 of them, I would not like to stop the flow, but firstly, I would request Dr. D.M. Pestinji, who despite his bad health has managed to be here for the inaugural note. Professor Rajesh Chandwani could not join.
You are on mute.
You are muted.
Sorry, sir. So I don't know where I got on the mute, but yeah, to carry on, I would invite Professor D.M. Pestinji Sahab to inaugurate the program, and then we get the opportunity to listen to the stalwarts. So Dr. Pestinji, thank you for joining us despite your bad health today. Professor Chandwani is also not available because of COVID positive report in the morning. He was a little not well today, so we are missing out on him. But we have Dr. D.M. Pestinji to inaugurate the program. We request him to kindly be here. Sir, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Clear, Nadeed. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, thank you. I think this was the time slot allotted to Rajesh, but he's down with COVID, it seems, and I'm recovering out of some other similar ailments. Without much ado, let me first welcome on my personal behalf and on behalf of the Academy, the 2 notable speakers for the afternoon, Mr. Yogi Sriram and our own Keith D'Souza. I also welcome the fraternity of HR listeners this evening. Another might be interested, not around. And just a special word of congratulations to Runa. I think she's going to get her fellowship today from the Academy. And like a special congratulations to Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay, and because he's this year's Distinguished Fellow Award receiver. So, Devi Prasad, all the best, and yeah, we hope you keep doing big things, as you are in the habit of doing some very good path-breaking research in the area in which you are interested. So, I'll just make a few small observations which may have some relevance this evening or to subsequent times for HR professionals, both on the academic side as well as on the practicing side. I personally believe these are exceptionally trying times for HR professionals in the country, or possibly all over the world. The age-old existing systems are completely in disarray. The pandemic crisis is internationally, regionally, country-wise, and even locally. So there are various dimensions which come to surface, and this is a matter of concern for HR professionals. And we have, as HR professionals, we have to strive hard to find creative solutions for all these type of difficulties which organizations are facing, people at personal levels are also facing. Issues of health and well-being, and people facing economically several types of crises, all that, employment, readjustments. These are issues which directly concern HR professionals. Before a couple of years, I think as HR professionals, we were comfortable in our own slots. We could continue with the same organization or similar type of organizations, help them set things right and keep doing things as they were. It's not going to be the same now. Every organization is going through something which earlier they were not going through. Productivity losses have to be minimized and human well-being has to be restored. I don't know how, and I mean, there are efforts, but we don't know with what success we are going to come out in the, say, time frame of 4 years or 5 years or 6, 7 years, but not a decade. We require results faster than that. HR professionals need to get up so that they can meet the new challenges of workplace, family, and the individual. Now, there were a lot of concerns some years ago about work-life balance and things of that sort. Now, suddenly we realize that there's nothing like the work-life balance. You know, people are living at home and working. So you can't say that there is a problem of work-life balance. In fact, there's complete imbalance now. And the earlier model of how to make the work adjust with the life demands or non-work demands is completely sort of a misnomer. In stress research, as Surabhi would know, we call it the inter-role distance stress. And now we don't know whether there is an inter-role distance stress. What is causing what, or which is causing which? Also, this type of sudden pressure and unexpected, uncalled for demands on HR professionals made me think that we need to have a little peep into the personality of HR professionals themselves. What is it that they are going through? And I've been in touch with the academy to launch a project on issues of mental health for the HR professionals. I mean, people shouldn't take it otherwise, because, you know, there have been researches, not now, for the past 50, 60 years, on the health status of the medical fraternity. If we can check the health status of the medical fraternity, where's the harm in checking the mental health status of people, you know, in HR profession or any other profession? Even I would go a step forward in the mental health status of mental health professionals, you know, and there are lots of issues. There are lots and lots of issues. There is something now in the new discipline which has come up, the organizational clinical psychology. So there are clinical psychological inputs required for dealing with organizational demands. And I think that the academy can take the initiative for conducting some type of research on this issue. And I'm sure all of you listening to me would be certainly happy to collaborate with us and provide us the necessary data, etc. Traditionally, health has not been a concern for HR professionals. I remember my first research article on executive health, which was published in 1987. Lots of HR professionals told me we have nothing to do with health. You have your own quixotic ideas, and we are more concerned about how we get productivity, how we get performance, how we get satisfaction, things of that sort. And health was one of the most neglected aspects of HR field. I think the modern times repeatedly keep reminding us that health is not as remote as HR professionals have believed it to be or may tried to make others believe that they have nothing to do with the health and health status of the individual. When I am referring to health, I'm not referring to the sickness status alone, but it can be the wider mental health issues also. We keep on getting, under extremely stressful performance situations like the armed forces or the paramilitary forces. We get cases of suicide, we get cases of fratricide, we get sometimes cases of juniors, opening fire on their superior officers and all that, which are then, of course, attributed to mental health issues. But I think by and large, now we are at a stage where, as HR professionals, we just cannot wash our hands off this very particular, very significant thing. And the starting point would be best ourselves. So we can think of something like a mental health for HR professionals as an area of research. And I'm sure that Dr. Nidhi Vashisht will heed to my request, and we might work out a small project on this. The last point which I would like to highlight here is that the COVID-19 crisis has brought out both the negative as also the positive aspects of life. It's believed that it has created a lot of negativity and all that. Fine, there's no, no dispute about it. But I also observe that it has created something which was, I would put it on the positive side. And one of my publications, which is due out anytime, maybe in a month or two, in which I have highlighted these, which are the negatives and which are the positives. On the positive side, I found that people have learned to deal with their emotions. People have learned to be more creative in dealing with their day-to-day lifestyle. People have also realized what are their core strengths, which they never had opportunity to look at earlier. So there is not all that negative, There are the good also, which like when the churning takes place, bad thing and good thing all come to surface. And this particular publication, I would be very happy to share with you. If you people, anybody who is interested, you can put a request, and once it is out, I'll be most happy to share with everybody. So I think I will stop here because I don't want to lose time, make the audience lose the time for listening to the learned speakers with these upcoming, these comments to start the evening. I also pay my tribute, as I always done, to later Pareek, and again reiterate what I've been saying for about a little over 40 years now. That one of the reasons I decided to join Iron was that I will have an opportunity to work with Pareek. We did. That's my tribute to him. I'm sure he was one of the few who endorsed my views about health, executive health. And I'm sure that we have his blessings for giving HR a slightly new turn. I wouldn't say the twist, but slightly new turn to look at issues which we have never thought were legitimately part of our subject field. So thank you very much. And I wish the evening a great success. And all the best to all of you. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir. And do take good care of yourself. I'm sure by Monday you'll be back to the same energy that we would want you to be. Take good care, sir. Thank you. We move forward. I would invite Yogi Shriram Sahab to kindly start the address, and we are excitingly looking forward to learn from you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Surabhi, family members of Dr. Pareek who have tuned in, Dr. Vashisht, Professor Keith D'Souza, Professor Pestonji. Very special good evening to Professor T.V. Rao, whom I saw on the screen, friends and distinguished audience.
Thank you, sir.
The reason why I suggested to Professor Vashishta the topic of evidence-based management is because not only is it a great privilege to remember Professor Pareek today on the Udai Pareek Memorial Day for the great work he has done, but in his work concerning Octapace, E stands for experimentation, which is actually a part of evidence-based management. So very quickly, to travel with you about the work that was done, which is infinitely large, but just to bring about some highlights today evening. Professor Pareek talked about a concept called extension motivation. And today when we think about extension motivation, we think about something called a superordinate goal. And a fancy way of describing a superordinate goal is purpose. A lot of people are talking about purpose today. So if we think about industrialists, if you think about famous people who made a difference to society like Dr. Kurian or Mr. Narayan Murthy or Mr. A.M. Nayak in their respective fields, have had a superordinate goal, have had a sense of purpose, and that illustrates what Professor Pareek talked about with respect to extension motivation. That is, of course, besides very noble people like Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Kalam and Mother Teresa, etc. In his famous book on Beyond Management in 1981, he refers to this concept, which is also very relevant with respect to ESG goals in today's corporate context. And of course, all of us know about the concept of Dr. Pareek when he talked about Octapace, E expanding to experimentation. It gives me great pride on behalf of Larsen & Toubro, my colleagues in Larsen & Toubro, to share something that already Professor Vashishta referred to and also the announcement refers to, that Professor Udai Pareek and Professor T.V. Rao were the stalwarts who were responsible. I'm getting a back echo. Were the stalwarts who were responsible for setting up the Human Resource Department in Larsen & Toubro, I think in 1977. That is when AHRD for the first time got a definition of a function that cares for people, a function that develops in a very systematic, deliberate way, a culture in an organization. So I'd like to indulge in a few slides, with your permission, on evidence-based management, which is the topic for today. Basically, why are we talking about evidence-based management? Evidence-based management is just another way of saying that we deal in facts. That we deal in facts, we deal in reality. And evidence-based management pursues good decision-making. It is not based on intuition. It improves decision-making processes and frameworks. So give way the age of intuition, welcome the age of fact, welcome the age of evidence. The trend in decision making is moving from hypo, which is the highest paid individual in the room making a decision, to others also being involved based on the evidence that they bring to the table. So evidence-based management teaches us to learn to distinguish from what is fact, what is folklore, what is data, what is assertions, what is evidence from beliefs, anecdotes, and personal opinions versus hard statistics and facts. Now, please don't mistake me that evidence-based management doesn't need data all the time. It needs gathering of evidence and perhaps the habits of critical thinking and the habits of collecting evidence in a systematic manner, along with critical thinking, contribute to good decision making and contribute to evidence-based management. So unfounded ideas, fads, popularized beliefs by management gurus all end up in bad decision making. And when we read the work of Jeffrey Pfeffer of Stanford University, professor of organization behavior, he amplifies that evidence means information, facts, or data supporting or contradicting a claim, assumption, or hypothesis. It may be from local organizational or business indicators, such as company metrics, observations of practicing practitioners, but then if it is observations of practicing practitioners, one warning of the Surgeon General is that if it is based on personal judgment, it could be erroneous since judgment is susceptible to cognitive errors, to cognitive information, and is prone to biases of all types. So when we refer to evidence-based management, there are 6 steps that are discussed when you are resorting to evidence-based management for decision making. First is asking the right question, translating a practical issue into an answerable question. The second is acquiring and searching and retrieving evidence. The third is judging the trustworthiness of the evidence. The fourth is weighing and pulling together the evidence, which is called aggregating. So you have ask, acquire, appraise, aggregate. And then applying is incorporating the evidence into the decision-making process. And assessing is evaluating the outcome of the decision. I must assert that copying best practices blindly may not work. It may not work because benchmarking and best practice comparison demonstrates an alternate way of doing things. It's not a panacea for our organization to find a solution to its problems. What COVID-19 and the pandemic has taught us is medicine beyond quackery. It has taught us that there are layers and layers of the mystery that needs to be unraveled. And even today, as we speak, there is a controversy about the kind of quarantine period after Omicron. 7 days, some countries follow, 10 days, some countries follow, 5 days, some countries follow. But medical science is quickly taking over from this intuitive guesswork. In law, people pass an examination, and there is a practice that they are able to do because they pass the examination. Similarly, in medicine, there is a continuous quest to improve one's knowledge. One must ask, is there something like that in management, where you're continuously prompted to use scientific data to make decisions in evidence-based management. Of course, I do confess that the concept of data management, analytics, digital is catching up very fast. And that all means that evidence-based management is picking up, but that's in a narrow sense. And I would also appeal to consultants, to practitioners, to academicians, etc., to evangelize this concept more and more. Because casual benchmarking on ideology or beliefs goes against evidence-based management. Many organizations are still steeped with orthodoxies. They're steeped with what works for them for many, many years, what has worked for them. Is it individual pay for performance systems that has worked? Is it a belief that you need to link your rewards in a particular manner? Is it that the culture which works for company X needs to be emulated in company Y just because it sounds great? Or in your company Y, have you for years together practiced a particular way of doing things, which has become an organizational orthodoxy? All this goes against the concept of evidence-based management. For many years, you may not believe it, but Google, which is a high-tech company, believed that people stay in organizations and quit rates are low because they admire the domain knowledge in a supervisor. Till they actually did something which is evident to all of us from many studies, focus group discussions with groups across the company, and found that out of 8 factors that stack up as to what are the important facts for evidence, what are the important facts for leadership evidence, they found that domain knowledge, expertise in, say, .NET or C++ or Java, or being a terrific solution architect, or having terrific product knowledge, comes last out of the 8. The first one is about how you have good conversations, how you're engaging, how you encourage your people, and so on. So it's just one example of how you gather evidence to bust a theory that some leader must have talked about at some point of time. A British telecom company did a survey amongst 12,500 employees on its employees to find out about what do they perceive about their supervisors. And since it was a very sensitive survey, they perhaps missed out on certain camouflaging of the question in a way where confidentiality would not be compromised. They asked in the data, amongst other things, the date of birth, they asked about the PIN code or the zip code, and they asked about data which perhaps made employees believe that their confidentiality would be compromised, and barely 5% participated. So when they checked with people about why such a low percentage, they found that this was a giveaway. And therefore, they changed the age to ranges of age, and they skipped the zip code, and the participation went up to 67%. I must dwell upon a study which is very relevant for today's times, particularly because work from home is being discussed so often. And the jury is still out whether work from home is a useful management practice for raising productivity and profitability or not. So then I turn to the work of Stanford professor Nicholas Bloom, who has asserted that work from home actually increases productivity and increases the performance of employees who are allowed work from home. So Nicholas Bloom in 2015 published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics, along with 3 or 4 other co-authors, where he extolled the benefits of work from home. Work from home till then was a bad concept. If you typed work from home in Bing or Google, you'll find odd things like people in their underwear, or people looking shabby, or people looking as if they've just got out of bed and stuff. So work from home was not something that was received till the study was done. And perhaps that feeling may not be completely dismantled. That it's not really a practical tool for increasing productivity. So he did this research in a NASDAQ listed company, which has 16,000 employees, and reported this research. The name of the company is Ctrip, a Chinese travel company, and found that by using the control group and experimental group, by using a technique called randomized controlled trials, systematically found that the productivity actually increased by 13%, which means that 1 full day of productivity was saved in a week. Just to give you some facts, 996 employees from the travel and hospitality division of Ctrip volunteered to undergo this experiment. 996. Of these 996, they found about half of them eligible for participating in the experiment because they had the proper kind of broadband, they had a solitary place in the house to work from home, or a place which was a single room, which was cut off from others, no disturbance. They had all the wherewithals, and they had put in 6 months of tenure in the company. So he used a lottery method of deciding who will work from home and who will work from office by looking at birthdays and by doing an odd and even count. So this was a very systematic, I would say, method by an economics professor to do an experiment in HR to find out whether work from home really worked or not. 2 important points. 1, the work from home model that he allowed the volunteers to go through who were lucky enough to get the lottery ticket for working from home was 4 days in a week to work from home with 1 day in office. Second, very, very important, the element of choice was brought in. You could choose whether to work from home or work from office. And they found from this study, as well as a subsequent study, which was very, very recently published and announced by Nicholas Bloom and his colleagues, in the United States, more and more people are working from home. Productivity in such cases is increasing, though because of all the chatter on hybrid model and so on, the current preference seems to be in the United States, 2 days in office, 3 days work from home, and of course they don't work on Saturday, Sunday. But the fact is that at least some study was done to bear out whether work from home makes sense as a management practice or not. There are other examples also of using randomized controlled trials, which is the gold standard for evidence-based management. I am not saying that it's possible to use RCT all the time. You need to set up an experiment with very punctilious standards, because you need to have similar kind of roles, you need to have a controlled environment, You need to know about what are the variables you're tweaking, and you need to know what are you looking for in the RCT. So the teacher performance pay experiment, which was done by Karthik Muralidharan, University of California, San Diego, also used RCT, and they found that incentivized schools performed significantly better than non-incentivized schools. And then there's another example by Debashish Bhattacharjee of Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, about the effects of group incentives in an Indian firm, which is evidenced from payroll data, again using RCT. And he found that as the group size increases, the free rider phenomena increases also, and therefore the effectiveness of the group incentive diminishes considerably. There is often a mistake made by practitioners, consultants, evangelizers of the concepts of HR practice, of management practice, of mixing up correlation and causation, which is extremely important for evidence-based management. Sales of ice creams correlated with deaths by drowning. Naturally, both have correlation because both are done in both happen in summer. So when two variables are strongly correlated, the value of one variable predicts the value of another variable. But in the case of causation, it implies that if the value of one variable is changed, then the value of the second variable will change accordingly. So these are all statistical correlations found to be valid, but ridiculous. And I'm stating these because sometimes we get carried away by things as simple as this. Number of tattoos was correlated with likelihood of motorcycle accidents by US Army personnel. Teachers' salaries were correlated to price of liquor. Leaving lights on while sleeping led to short-sightedness in children. Married men lived longer. Self-esteem leads to academic achievement. There are three reasons why correlation. There are three reasons why correlation does not imply causation. Two variables may be correlated by sheer coincidence. That's one. Causation is asymmetrical in its relationship, while correlation is a symmetrical relationship. So X and Y may be correlated to each other, but their correlation may be affected by a third factor, Z, which is causing both X and Y. So there is a slide on this, and I'll be happy to share all this with the honorable audience. Fisher's tale, of course, is very famous in statistics, and he contributed a lot to evidence-based management and also challenged some of the concepts. The sources for evidence-based management are very important to note. The first is scientific literature, empirical studies. There are lots of publications available in science, not so many in management which are backed by solid research and data, but there are still available, and piecing these together are very important. Promoting research in academic institutions, collaborations with professors, amongst HR practitioners is extremely important. Please treat your organization like a human laboratory. It is possible to do non-controversial, harmless experiments which can yield very interesting results and very valuable results. Practitioners and professionals with expertise, and the organization itself is a very, very important source for internal data for evidence-based management. And of course, the stakeholders, what are their values, what are their concerns, and so on. The rest of the talk that I have been asked to give, I would like to devote on a controversial subject, because I too am looking for answers. I too am searching. I too am groping. I too am looking for evidence. And this is the area of social psychology experiments, something which today America once in a while reminds us of when you go through a book on organizational behavior or you deal with the scientific work of masters. So let me begin with the work in 1971 in Palo Alto of Philip Zimbardo, who was inspired by the work of Solomon Asch, and his work was on conformity and obedience. A very controversial experiment. It was not uncontroversial at all, in case you ask me that question. Anonymity was studied in this experiment because the prisoners and those who went, very quickly, just to tell you about this, in this experiment, the Stanford basement was converted into a prison. I think there were 23 subjects who were selected for this experiment. Some of them were told, Confederates were told to act as prisoners, or not act, but actually become prisoners. And some of them were the jailers. And Philip Zimbardo observed the behavior over a period of 1 week, but the experiment had to be called off because of the brutality. And several things came out of this. Sadism came out. The desire to please the experimenter with what is called as a demand bias. The social environment of the people who were interviewed had dark glasses, the jailers, and behind the dark glasses, they were hiding with anonymity. So this is a path-breaking experiment, no doubt extremely controversial, and I'm not telling people to do such a drastic experiment. But perhaps an experiment which will tell us about what is obedience, what is conformity, and why do perfectly normal people do dreadful things? Why do they follow orders without challenging? Why do they just clone behaviors of others? And what is group pressure? And then, of course, there is the famous Solomon Asch experiment, where he had 9 or 10 Confederates who were all told about the experiment in advance, and he showed some lines which were unequal. And he asked one of the subjects whether, along with the others, whether the line was unequal or it was equal to the others. And while in the first part of the experiment, the subject said, it seems to be longer, because in fact it was longer. When he found that the other colleagues were giving an answer which was untrue and reverse, decided to conform with what the group said and said, no, indeed, it's shorter. So that was a path-breaking kind of experiment in the early 50s. So the point I'm trying to make is that if we can pick up small pilots, run experiments with small pilots, try to create an environment which the real life would offer, so that when we get into a conference room and we make assertions, rather than being intuitive about it or just presenting blindly best practices, present your experience. Then again, of course, Elton Mayo, during the Hawthorne experiments, discovered that money is not the only driving force. Lots of criticism, a lot of people criticized him, including Clark Kerr and so on. But the fact is that Elton Mayo was bold enough to do these experiments in that factory that made relays and came to certain conclusions which were very important, such as the observer expectancy effect, the demand effect, the desire to please the experimenter, that money is not the only influencing factor, that supervision in a supportive manner works, better communication works, and working in group is a very powerful method. If we look at research in behavioral science, especially in the area of learning and development, the work of Jean Lev comes alive in my mind. She observed tailors in Liberia and how they worked and how they found that the training of these tailors happened in the situation. A serendipitous or an accidental discovery in this research was the learning was in the situation itself. The latent learning came by observation and by also because of gaps during the sewing of a particular dress. Time gaps, or when you start from the end, there was a particular sequence that was adopted. That gap created an opportunity for the kind of learning that she observed. So very interesting observations. We may not go blindly because all these studies have critics also, but something for us to think about. Finally, Bandura's Bobo doll experiments, which is about modeled expression, is also very, very interesting, where an inflatable Bobo doll was beaten up by a lady professional in a psychology lab, and children were asked to observe this pummeling of this inflatable doll. And they repeated exactly the same kind of behavior, which is about modeling expression. So all these psychology experiments have taught me, when I read them and when I try to internalize their meaning, including the more contemporary Nicholas Bloom's work, that experimentation, that gathering evidence is something which is very important. And perhaps if late Dr. Udai Pareek is listening to me, and of course, Professor T.V. Rao hopefully is on the circuit listening, will smile because they have devoted their entire lives to experiments and to present evidence to practitioners about what is fiction and what is truth. Thank you very much and good evening.
Excellent. Very scholarly, Yogi, very good. Excellent. Very appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was such an intellectual class. I did not want to miss. I would love to hear more from you, sir. So you'll have to give us some more time in the near future. It was brilliant, sir. And I think you have just given an example of how evidence-based teaching also works, with so many processes that you have giving 6 quick steps to apply, then giving a lot of examples for us to relate with, and then ultimately giving us the sources of how to be able to do it. It has been a phenomenally learning experience for all of us. Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I'm really glad you joined, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure these experiments, each of one, everybody was busy noting down, so we'll have to take over the weekend some more time to dwell upon all these small codes that you have passed on to us. Thank you so much. We'll definitely catch back with you and try and see if we can get more time, because our scholars would, I'm sure they are sending messages that they would love to hear more about you.
Most certainly.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. We move forward. I'm sure another bright session, sir. Akil, I'm seeing Akil, sir. So I'm like, hi, hello, sir. Inviting Professor Keith for the next session.
Thank you, Nidhi. And thanks for that talk, Yogi. That was very interesting. Some of the things that you have said are going to overlap with what I'm going to be saying. So, but I guess I'll sort of skip over those parts when we come to it. So, welcome to all of you. Thank you to the Academy of HRD for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to to present some ideas to you. I want to begin with the special word of homage and tribute to Dr. Udai Pareek, who together with Dr. T.V. Rao, Father Abraham, myself, and some others, and of course, Dr. Pestanji at IIM Ahmedabad, Dr. Khandwala at IIM Ahmedabad, they were all part of the learning process that I went through, and they were in fact responsible for my entry into the HR and OD profession. And I'm tremendously grateful to them, and what I am today is really because of their influences and their training and their coaching. Whatever mistakes I've made are entirely because of my own, and there are many of them that I have made, but I don't attribute any of those to Dr. Pareek and his team. In my talk this morning, I'm going to reflect on some of those experiences and share them with us, because I think they have brought in some maybe post facto evidence about maybe what things work, why they work, and some things that we might like to keep in mind as we go ahead in many of our HR interventions. But just to complete this, what I said, I believe that Dr. Udai Pareek was a man it reminds me of Shakespeare's words, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. And that's the words that I think describe Dr. Pareek as I remember. Person of tremendous versatile capabilities, and the kind of contributions he has made to both academia as well as to practice are tremendous. They are sort of path-breaking this thing. So my homage to him and to the other faculty who were part of that team, Dr. Udai Pareek, Dr. Pestanji, Dr. Khandwala, and others on this. Let me begin by sharing some of the experiences that I had in the course of my professional life in industry and then also in academics. There are some things that come to mind which I think are, in retrospect, they are perhaps things that we may have been able to do differently had we no, actually we did do a lot of things with evidence, but there is also a lot of retrospective lessons that we have, which we can incorporate in future in trying to see what are the lessons we can draw from that experiences, which we can convert into practice. So some of the HR practices that I felt had met with mixed results in the past. And those that I had been involved in. One is the goal-based, target-based performance management systems, which were the big thing when I entered industry in 1978. That was a time where a lot of companies had experimented with the performance management systems. Larsen and Toubro had undertaken that. And then BEML, which I had joined at that point of time, and where Professor T.V. Rao and Udai Pareek were consultants there, they also started implementing the performance management systems. So there are some lessons that one can draw from that experience. The other experience is with respect to individual incentives and rewards, something that I came across in several organizations that I work, where there are some thoughts that I have about perhaps how evidence could have helped us look at them differently. The third thing that I'd like to talk about is the use of today, the very widespread use of the bell curve in performance assessments. In recent times, it has fallen into some amount of disrepute, but there are still organizations which go by the bell curve, and academic institutions, including the one I'm working with, are still sold on this idea of using the performance curve the bell curve in performance assessments. Then, of course, benchmarking. Yogi has already talked about it, but maybe I'll make a comment or two on that. There is a whole field of OD interventions which have been widely practiced in industry over the last many decades: sensitivity training, team building, culture change programs, conflict management, and all those were excellent interventions. But could we learn something from the evidence of those experiences and try and say, how could we have done that differently, or how could they have been done more effectively? If we were to do these in future, what are some learnings that we can get from the evidence of past experiences, from the evidence of practice? So I'm just trying to blend those thoughts together and try and see how could we do things differently, or perhaps with a better chance of success if we were to incorporate the findings that we had from the evidence we got. let me make some points. Some of the practices that met with, I think, mixed results, not in all organizations. There are some organizations where they worked very well. There are some organizations where I think the results were mixed. And I'd like to sort of propose what could have been some of the reasons why these things did not meet with unalloyed success. Okay. Let's look at the goal-based performance management systems, which was widely introduced and used from the 1978 to 80s until I think the late 1990s. A large number of organizations swore by the goal-based, target-based performance management system. And in some organizations, they worked. In some organizations, they did not work too well. And in some organizations, they were actually finally dropped and organizations reverted back to old systems of performance appraisal. What was the lesson when we look at that? When I look at my experiences in several organizations where I was involved with the performance management and goal-based appraisal systems, I noticed one common theme is the overemphasis on quantitative achievement and unambiguous performance criteria. You identify your KRAs, you decide your goals, and then you evaluate, assess your performance in the middle of the year and at the end of the year. It seemed on paper to be an absolutely objective process by which you can quantify achievement. And the performance criteria appear to be unambiguous. Okay. However, we found that for various reasons, one of the reasons is that not all performance is so measurable and quantitative. And I think that should be obvious. And yet performance management systems kept on emphasizing on quantitative targets and quantitative goals and so on, forgetting that a lot of performance is due to factors that may be not very measurable and that is ambiguous. Okay, and those things needed to be kept in mind. I remember in some of the organizations where we tried to introduce the system, the feedback would always be from employees that not everything about our performance can be measured. We would dismiss that. Sometimes we would dismiss and say that this is just part of the resistance to a new system. But perhaps had we looked at the evidence, maybe we would have been a little wiser at that time and said, there are aspects about performance which could not be measured in terms of quantitative results. There is the qualitative aspects of performance that we need to look into account. So how would we take those into account in making an objective assessment of performance? And in fact, in one of the organizations that I work, now there is another interesting thing about this. The goal-based performance, target-based performance management systems have worked in some organizations in India and have not worked too well in other organizations. Now, which are the organizations in which they have worked? In two of the organizations where I think they worked pretty well were two multinational companies. And in the organizations where they did not seem to work well were the non-Indian public sector or family-run businesses. Had we had the evidence, and a lot of evidence has come from the work of, I think all of us would be familiar with the work of Grit Hofstede, who looked at how cultures differ from one country to another. And one of the findings that Hofstede came up with was that in Eastern cultures like India, people are not very comfortable with very quantitative aspects. There's a greater tolerance or greater perhaps even desire for ambiguity. They don't like things in black and white. Okay, whereas in certain cultures, like in the Western cultures, in America and others, there is a strong desire for clear measurement, for unambiguous criteria. Now that can give us a clue about why the goal-based performance management systems work in the West maybe, but maybe they have not been too successful in Eastern countries. In the Eastern countries, they work in organizations like the multinational companies, which were having an internal culture which replicates the Western cultures. Okay? Like two of the multinational companies that I worked with, very, very focused on results. And everything was sort of quantitative. Whereas in the other organizations, which were the Indian organizations or the public sector companies, the trust in targets and goals and numbers was not very much. And so people felt very skeptical. They often felt that these numbers don't mean anything. Now, had we looked at, or maybe had we done some kind of a assessment of this, maybe the performance management systems that we introduced may have been more successful in all organizations. So this is one thing that perhaps we did not do, or there has not been enough evidence to support the system that we had introduced. The second thing is in terms of individual incentives and rewards. I've not been involved too much in incentives and individual incentives, except for administering these in one or two companies that I was responsible. But from that, it became very clear that overemphasis on individual performance rather than collective performance could be a factor that did not make the systems very effective. And this again comes out with the findings of Hofstede and other people on cultures, where they found that in India, for instance, people tend to think in terms of collectivities. They don't think of themselves as individuals. We are what Hofstede called a very collectivist culture rather than an individualist culture. If that is the case, then systems that reward individual performance would be looked at with a lot of suspicion in India. And that's exactly what happened with many of the individual performance systems. They were seen as unfair for the simple reason that people feel that the individual's performance is not based on his or her competence alone. If there's a team that is involved that contributes to the performance. So eventually you can't attribute good performance even of individuals to the individual's capabilities alone, individual capability. There is a team or a group of people who contribute to that individual. Now, so this is another thing, perhaps a little more understanding about whether and what kind of circumstances would systems that focus on individual incentives and rewards work. It's not that they don't work at all, but under what circumstances do they work? Do we keep those in mind before we try to introduce these kind of systems across the board? A third, this thing is, and I think this is something that I feel particularly strongly about, because I don't know, I think in recent times, the use of the bell curve in performance assessments has again fallen into disrepute in the corporate sector. But in the academic sector, it still is there. In the institute where I teach, there are some departments and so on where they religiously follow this bell curve principle in performance assessment. And I think we understand that in the bell curve, there are some people who are at the bottom of the curve, the wrong end of the bell curve, and there are some people who are put into the, let's say, the positive end or the high performing end of the curve. And the current wisdom is that people must be forcibly assessed, allocated to the different ends of the curve. And this kind of a forcible assignment to the different extremes in the curve can create a lot of ill feeling. There are some people who will compulsorily be considered as low performers. There will be some people who will be considered as high performers. A lot of this was much of the system, I think, was something that came out of the experiences of G and Jack Welch's famous, his style of management of a very, very performance-driven, performance-oriented kind of a focus. However, there are serious issues with the bell curve itself. For instance, if you have just a team of 5 people in a department, you may be able to allocate these people to, you may be able to see a normal curve in their performance, but that doesn't mean that the lowest performer falls into the lowest performing bracket. Okay, for instance, on a 5-point scale of 1 to 5, all people, there might be a normal curve between 3 and 5. It is not necessary that people should compulsorily fall into the rating 1 and rating 2 purpose. If all of them are high performers, you could still have a bell curve, but that doesn't mean that some of them would be forcibly put into the first quadrant and some into the 5th quadrant. The mistake that is often made is the forcible stretching of the bell curve to cover all the different grades or in all the ratings in the performance rating system. So the bell curve does have a logic. The point is that without using that, without understanding the logic, without looking at the data, we forcibly attribute some people to be low performance, some to high performers, and worse, we reward and punish them because of that. GE was reputed to throw out the people who fall into the wrong end of the normal curve. What a waste of human resources. Especially if they are people who have had the experience, who have had the qualification. You are throwing out people who have contributed or learned in the process. Maybe they have not done too well in the past, but they are people who could contribute a lot in future. By this blind adherence to this bell curve, we actually create a lot of injustice. I think it's something that is causing a lot of injustice even in the academic world. Now, there are two other practices that I'd want to. One is in the context of benchmarking. Yogi has already pointed out that there was at the time that when I was with the Academy of HRD in the 1980s, benchmarking was a great fad at that point of time, and many companies tried to follow this benchmarking approach. Incidentally, it is also one of the things that was mentioned by the two Harvard professors whose article Yogi just now pointed out, that the context is important. Okay? What applies in one time and one setting may not apply to other times and other settings. In other words, what is sauce for the goose may not be sauce for the gander. Okay, so there are good practices, but those good practices need to be seen in the context in which they are practiced. One good practice may be appropriate in certain organizations, given the kind of culture, the structure of the organization, the age of the organization, the geographical context, but the same thing may not be applicable in the others. What used to happen during that time when benchmarking was a fad is that a number of organizations tried to develop practices based on benchmarking. I remember one of the projects we got at when I was there with the Academy of HRD was drawing up a benchmarking for HR practices in different organizations. Okay. So there again, the connection between the evidence and the application was probably something that needed to be relooked at. And then there's a whole field of OD interventions. I think a lot of work that we've done, and much of my work with Dr. Udai, Pareek, TV Rao and others were in the area of OD interventions. We've done a number of OD interventions, sensitivity training, team building, culture change programs, conflict management, and so on. Each one of them were by themselves very good. They are very, they are by in terms of their basic principles underlying them, they are excellent. But every one of them have a certain context. Many organizations that had tried, for instance, sensitivity training has worked in some organizations where there is an open culture, where there is a willingness to accept feedback, where there is a lack of power distance among employees. In organizations which are not very hierarchical and very authoritarian, sensitivity training would probably work, but in others it may be a complete failure. In some organizations, it in fact turned out to be a disaster. Team building. It's a wonderful intervention by itself. It leads to a lot of feel-good ideas, the belief that we are doing something positive for HR. But not all organizations, not all tasks, not all cultures are conducive to team building. If you have tasks and goals that require individual performance and individual assessment, then team building might in fact turn out to be a distraction. So the uncritical application of team building as an intervention is another. In terms of culture change programs, in many organizations, you try to bring about, a very open culture or a collaborative culture, but the background of the organization, the kind of work that the organization has done, the history of the organizations, all these things would affect the way in which the culture change programs succeed or fail. Conflict management also. Okay, we've done a lot of interventions are done to bring about conflict, to manage conflict in organizations. But a lot of factors come in which may not be conducive to that. One is in India, for instance, the very socio-political system in which we are in is not always conducive to conflict management, especially in those organizations like the public sector companies where there is a lot of unionism and where there is a lot of, let's say, political interventions in this. In those kind of organizations, what works in some organizations with respect to conflict management may not work in others. So there again, if we had do a little bit of checking, a little bit of evidence, a little bit of research that we might, before we start applying some of these practices, maybe we would have a better measure of success. I've just given a few of the examples, but I think there are plenty of instances where managers rush in where others would fear to tread, what I would say where not angels would fear to tread, researchers would probably fear to tread because there is not enough data to support the logic of that intervention. However, there is a flip side to this, and let me bring into this. Now, okay, there's an interesting thing that I'd like to share is the work of a comment by Chris Bradley about, you remember the time where you had a wonderful book called In Search of Excellence by Peters and Waterman, which talked about what made certain companies really great. And there is another book by Good to Great by Jim Collins. And Bradley, after looking at those experiences, he found that in many of those organizations which had at one time been touted as islands of excellence and examples of how organizations can move from good to great, he found that in retrospect, after 10 years, some of those organizations did not seem to live up to those standards. And in fact, some of them, in the case of In Search of Excellence, probably went out of business after some years. Now, Bradley looks at all this, and then he said, and I think this is a lesson that we can get from that evidence: take prescriptions of greatness with a grain of salt. In particular, watch out for the common tendency to underplay the role of context and luck, and over-attribute success to things that are visible, controllable, or flattering. Go to substance, not the form. Okay, I'll leave out the receipt. Above all, respect the trend. Do everything you can to get ahead of it, and don't kid yourself that you can fight it. Even the greatest companies couldn't hold back the tide. So there are certain circumstances which add to success of management and HR. There are certain times where there are reasons why those same practices would not work. It would help if we get more evidence when we try to introduce practices in organizations. I'm not saying that we don't introduce, but maybe we need to sort of fine-tune our processes of getting evidence and trying to back up what we are doing with evidence. So let me look at the inferences that we can draw from whatever I've said. One is, in the absence of relevant updated evidence, practices often stem from dogma and belief. There is a saying, but I think it was Maslow who first made this comment, but it was also picked up by others, Stanley Herman in the field of OD. For him who has a hammer, the whole world is a nail. For him who has, feels that this is a system that will succeed, we want to have that system succeed in every organization. So an uncritical application of systems which work in some context but don't work in the other context because we fail to get enough evidence to support the applicability of the system. So this is one inference that I'd like to draw. Let me take a second inference. Practices are based on experiences in different contexts. The context of the organization structure, the culture, the people, the environment, and the situation. What may work in some organizations, like what would work in public sector organizations, may not work in private sector organizations. What may work in westernized kind of organizations may not work in traditional Indian family dynamic. What may work in organizations that are facing a very turbulent, challenging environment may not work in organizations that operate in a stable, safe environment. The situation also matters. Is this a crisis situation? Or is it a calm, placid situation? The situation creates a lot of effect on the way in which, on the success or failure of this. The third inference is there is an interesting comment that in the book, The Fifth Discipline, where the author says, we often say that failures are stepping stones to success. Our past failures, we learn from that and they become stepping stones to success. But Peter Senge in The Fifth Discipline says that in the case of organizations, very often, past successes may in fact be stepping stones to failure. And the reason for this is because we have succeeded with these practices in the past, we believe that we will continue succeeding with them in the future. We fail to collect evidence. We fail to verify things because it succeeded elsewhere and in the past, it's going to succeed in the future. That's why Peter Senge says past successes may be stepping stones to failure. Another inference that I'd like to make is our tendency to confuse the trees for the forest. We look at bits of evidence, something that has worked here, something that has worked there, and then we connect 2 and 2 together and we make 22. Okay? We need to look at things from a totality. There are individual bits of data that we have that tell us about success or failure, but together, what does it all mean? The whole is more than the sum of its parts. So bits of data we collect by just pulling them together may not give us the holistic understanding of the phenomena or the reality that we are looking at. The last inference is, there is a tendency for us to have what is called a self-serving bias in examining evidence. There's one of the organizations that I was associated with was one that was, suffering from a tremendous amount of employee attrition among the sales staff. And it became such a high disturbing trend that the chairman of the company got really agitated, and he started pulling up the head of HR, who was that time my boss, incidentally. And he demanded that we should look into this and find out what is the causes of this attrition. And so we went into a very extensive process of trying to
reconnect with few customers.
Sorry. Okay. We went into an extensive process of trying to find out what are the reasons for this attrition. I suggested to the boss that one of the things that we could do is simply talk to our people, the people in the field who were the ones from which there was maximum attrition, and find out what are their concerns. Talk to people who had left the organization. We had a very good system of what was that? The report that they fill out before the exit form. We had a lot of exit information data. So I said, let's look at that. Let's talk to people. But he said, no. Let's look at the analysis of statistical data. So what they went, and one of the hypotheses that the person had was, and in fact, he used that hypothesis to try and reassure the chairman that maybe this is not such a big problem. His hypothesis was that the largest reason for attrition is because of poor performance. The people who were leaving the organization were people who were poor performers, and therefore their attrition was in fact favorable to the organization. And in order to prove that, we went into looking at all the data and tried to calculate.
It's gone quiet, so I guess he's not joining us.
I'm sorry. So we started looking at the data, and we came across an interesting thing. On a 5-point scale of 1 to 5, where 5 was very good performance and 1 was very poor performance, we found that the average performance rating of the people who had left the organization was something like, I think it was 3.75 or something like that. In other words, people with fairly good performance ratings were the ones who were leaving. Of course, unfortunately, we didn't compare those who were staying back. What was their performance? We did not look at that. When I suggested to that, I was ruled out. Now, it was a disturbing thing because it seemed to suggest that many of the people who were leaving were people who were already good performers. So what did they do? We changed the goalposts. We changed the criteria and said, now let us look at people who have got 4. And then we went up to 4.5. And eventually we found that a large number of people who had left the organization were people who had got less than 4.5. And so therefore the conclusion, and in fact that was a report that was given to the chairman, was the people who are leaving are poor performers. They've got less than 4.5. And therefore it should not be a matter of concern for the organization that these people have left. In fact, there seemed to be this attrition is actually positive for the organization. Now, as you can see, this is a rather convoluted logic, but it is a way in which data can be manipulated in order to support our own preconceived notions. So we also need to look at practices are based on different, okay, I've already mentioned that. That is an example of self-serving bias in examining evidence. And of course, there are many things about behavior and performance and organizational success which are not very amenable to quantitative measurement. In fact, there's a very famous saying by Henry Mintzberg, the well-known Harvard professor, who once said, a lot in organizational life which is significant is not measurable. And a lot that is measurable is not significant. And so the challenge for us is, how do we develop evidence to back our this, which means that merely collecting data, merely collecting quantitative information is not enough. What is the inference that we have to draw from this? It means, let me come to this conclusion. Failure to gain evidence by sufficient thinking and analysis of relevant data from the past and from others' experiences, and to develop a theory of what works under what circumstances, can result in the failure of even supposedly best practices. What we need is evidence. But what kind of evidence? We need quantitative evidence, but we also need the evidence from our common sense, from our observations, from our understanding of reality. So that is what we are talking about when we are talking about evidence in order to deal with things. So Yogi has already given you one definition of evidence-based measurement. So I'll skip over this. I'll be sharing with you these slides. So you'll be able to look at that. But let's look at what is evidence-based management. We've already seen it involves asking, acquiring, appraising, aggregating, etc. But let me go back to the work that Udai and TV and we were doing. Much of the work that we were doing was based on evidence. May not be a complete evidence, but then we are not researchers in the organizations. We are not hardcore academic researchers. We collect data, we collect evidence in order to support the actions that we have done. The evidence-based management system is central to the OD work that is done by good professionals and organizations. In fact, I think many of us would be aware of what is known as the action research model, based on the work of Kurt Lewin and other people who talked about the fundamental model that underlies most of organization development work and HRD work is the basis is collecting relevant research to be able to form the basis for the suggestions and this thing that we have done. In all the cases where we were involved in introducing HRD and OD, collecting research was collecting data through research was an important. Of course, we were not doing it in the academic university academic style. Not always that way. We would collect questionnaire data, we would talk to people, we would sense it, but we would not necessarily, though that research may not meet the standards of an academic university or institute, but that was research that was trying to find out what is the basis of the actions that we are going to be taking. And so the action research model is fundamental to much of the HRD and OD work that has been done. Begin by identifying the problem, gathering data, interpreting the data, not necessarily through computer analysis. Incidentally, that's the other problem that we have today. Because we have computers, because we have sophisticated calculators, everything must get into a statistical analysis. But you don't always need statistical analysis to come to legitimate conclusions. We need to use our common sense. We need to use our sense of intuition. Once we've interpreted the data, then you act on evidence. Like when I talked about interpreting data, I talked about the experience in that organization where the data was there, it was hitting us in the face. People were leaving the organization in hundreds every month. That was the data. If we had cared to ask people, talk to people, instead of that, we went into a very nonsensical process of collecting statistical data by looking at the records of people. Once you get that data, then you act on that data. There is no action that is absolutely foolproof. So in OD, the process is you use a tentative action. And once you do that, then you evaluate the results and then you continue the process of collecting more and more evidence. So the action research model is a classic model of evidence-based management or evidence-based research. You collect evidence that will support the management actions that we take. And that has been there, that has been part of the practice. Of course, it's not always followed perhaps as properly as it needed to be. Now, one of the things that often happens when we talk about evidence-based management is this, I would say, perceived conflict between theory and practice. I'm saying perceived, because actually there's no conflict. Much of theory, and let me bring you to this famous saying of Kurt Lewin, who once said, there is nothing more practical than a good theory. The reason why Kurt Lewin said that, he said that much of what we call as theory, and in fact, very often in the management world, in the organization world, theories seem to be somewhat of a bad word. Theory is seen as something that is fairy tales or very too ambiguous or too nebulous. But actually what Kurt Lewin said is that theory is something that is based on practice. It's derived from practice. And how is it derived? I think all of us would be familiar with Kolb's learning cycle. David Kolb looked at how do we develop knowledge? How do we learn about experiences? And he said there are four major processes, or main processes in the learning process of learning and growing and developing. One is through experiencing things, doing things, having experience. That's the practical experience which we have as managers. But that experience would mean nothing if we do not sit back and reflect on that experience. So there is a certain amount of thinking and reflection that takes place as a result of experience. Based on that experience and our reflections, we start forming theories. We develop a process of conceptualizing things, creating abstract conceptualization that leads to the development of theories, which is what enables us to experiment and try to do things differently, which in turn brings in new experiences. So the learning styles process is something that tells us the way in which we get evidence, and we use that evidence for bringing about improvements in practices. Now, the difficulty and the reason why there is often this skepticism, especially in the management world, that you guys sitting in institutes or universities, you're all very theoretical. And that's one of the things that there's something that often used to bug me when I was as an academician, is the students coming and telling me, we went for that placement interview, and the thing that the manager says, forget all that you have learned in this thing, that's all theory. When you come to the organization, you have to relearn everything. My reaction is, what a waste. You've spent so much money learning in an institution. We are not talking about fairy tales. What we teach you is based on experiences. And very often the people who participate in the classes and MDPs are people who bring in their experiences in the organizations. So what we are teaching is based on those experiences, and those experiences would add to the richness and the wisdom of these people when they go out to organizations. So when you have a manager telling a student who comes from a management institute, forget what you have learned, you have to relearn everything. Maybe the management should repay the student all the fees that he or she has paid in the management institute. So this is just, now, why is there this problem? I think because there is this fundamental gap between practice and theory. There need not be the gap, there should not be the gap. But the fact is that there is a perceived gap. The perceived gap is people who are in practice. They are people who are engaged in concrete experience according to the Kolb model. And they are people who actually do things and experiment with things. And the academic world, people are in a dreamland where they are watching things and they are thinking, but they are far removed from reality. It is this perceived gap between knowing and doing which is actually the problem in not being able to develop evidence-based management. But this need not be so. Because in the process of our practice, if we are able to look at our experiences and our experiments in organizations, and we were to reflect on what happens to based on other people's experiences, and we were to try and conceptualize from that, then we would have a holistic learning model that involves all these different phases. In other words, learning, which leads to change and improvement and effectiveness of management practices, involves all these 4 different dimensions. And that is what, in a certain sense, is evidence-based management. It's similar to what Yogi has just now described in the steps, and I've described using the Kolb's model. However, as I come to the end, there is something that I'd like to touch on, and that is, there is a flip side to this evidence-based management. And we see this happening today, and this is the reason why I'm very concerned and like to share this thing. What is the flip side of evidence-based management? Many students, there's a beautiful saying from a person called Ivan Illich. He's written a book, a very, very controversial book called Deschooling Society as early as 1973. And what he says, I think, reflects the kind of problems that we are facing in today's environment where there's so much of emphasis on research and analysis and data collection and so on. He's saying this in a slightly different context, but it's applicable here. Many students intuitively know what schools do for them. The schools confuse them, they school them to confuse process and substance. We confuse the need for research for good management. Okay? Once the distinction between substance and process is blurred, a new logic is assumed. The more the treatment there is, the better are the results. Or he says what? Escalation leads to success. In other words, the more research you do, more data collection you do, the more you are likely to be successful. Managements often don't have the time or the resources, and maybe they don't even need to do that because they can collect data and understand things based on their own intuition and understanding and common sense. The result of this extreme emphasis on data collection and analysis is the pupil is thereby schooled to confuse teaching with learning, grade advancement with education, a diploma with competence, and a diploma with competence and fluency with the ability to say something new. Health, learning, dignity, independence, and creative endeavor are defined as little more than the performance of institutions which claim to serve these ends. And their improvement is made to depend on allocating more resources to the management of hospitals, schools, and other agencies in question. Look at the plethora of so-called assessment organizations, so-called research institutions. The pressures that in academic institutions of the kind that I teach in, there's so much pressure to produce research, to produce more and more publications. Often, the publications become an end in themselves, rather than what is the purpose of that publication. So let me look at some of these things. One of the negative effects is that the obsessive search for evidence may result in unnecessary, biased, incorrect, or faulty information being used to make decisions. The example that I gave of that organization where we did a study on attrition is a very good example of that. Doing research to justify what you are doing. The second is data collection and collation may become ends in themselves rather than means to the end. In management, in organizations, collecting data is in order to improve management practices. In academic institutions, the purpose of data collection and research should be to improve knowledge. Unfortunately, because of high pressure on publication, on getting more and more accreditation and so on, research has become an end in itself. And so you have a lot of nonsensical research that is produced and nonsensical publications that are going on. The third important thing, and we see happening under conditions of high pressure and competition, evidence and data may be generated or exaggerated in order to support the desired conclusions. In other words, there is a lot of pressure for people to engage in either inconsequential or sometimes downright fraudulent kind of data. So let us look at the unintended consequences of the emphasis on research evidence. Proliferation of a huge amounts of data as evidence for even the most inane matter. Instead of going and talking to those employees and find out why are you going, you would have got a lot of data. We spent days, in fact, it turned out to be a couple of weeks, churning data without talking to the people who had left the organization. Research activity and related events, conferences, publications, and events become end in themselves. Look at the number of requests that we get to attend conferences. The way in which almost every second day there is somebody organizing, and all are incidentally are all international conferences. Every conference is an international conference because now it's possible for us to have these international conferences. What are they all leading to? How much of benefit are either society or organizations getting into? The competition for research builds up for generating the most amount of research and publication. So it's now become a prestige people that I've got 50 publications, you've got only 30, so therefore I'm better than you. Very often the quantity becomes more important than the quality of the learnings. Unhealthy competition for research, prominence, visibility, recognition, and rewards. Now it's become a matter of prestige that I'm recognized for publishing so many papers, I get awarded for this, and that has become an end in itself. It's become often a prestige matter and an ego matter for many people in the academic and the management world. Academicians and practitioners may be caught in a whirlpool of trivial and unproductive activity under the illusion that the more data and more evidence are better. Excessive data gathering and analysis may lead to analysis paralysis. Going back to that experience, we took such a long time to come to a conclusion and then to take action because we were trying to collect more and more data that would help us justify the decisions we had already taken incidentally. And finally, common sense, logic, balanced judgment are often the casualty from all this. We become so hung up on getting more and more data, more and more analysis, that we don't sit back and think about what would be the most sensible, logical, obvious thing to do. Very often we surrender logic, balance, and common sense on the altar of so-called research. So we've already looked at some suggestions about how do you develop research-based practice. some of these questions. What evidence is required? From where and where do we source the evidence? Secondary sources by talking to people, primary sources by primary sources by talking to people, secondary sources through data analysis. And there's plenty of data today, especially in this information age. There is no dearth of data. And as was said by the earlier speaker, you can always get data to support whatever conclusions you've got. So how much of data do you want? In OD, we say you need just enough data to be able to start the process of development, and then you collect more data as you go along. So how much is, again, a matter of judgment that you need to look at. How do we go about making sense of the evidence? That is the important thing. Sometimes we are so flooded with evidence of data that we don't know how to make sense out of it. And then we would tend to do some things which are basically faulty, like mistaking correlation for cause-effect relationships. And then finally, how do we apply the insights from evidence to improve practices? Okay, so these are some missing. Now, I want to share with you an ending, and just the last thing is a very beautiful video which I recently came across, which I thought is something relevant for all of us. Those of us who are caught in this illusion that more and more research leads to more and more improvement, that more and more publication leads to more and more knowledge and understanding and better management. Let's look at this. It's something that I downloaded with this. I hope you can see this. Let me check. Okay, the sound system.
Yeah, we can see this.
Okay.
He talked really about what is people coming out of university, master's degree or PhD, take them in the field, and they literally don't believe anything that this is a paper. It's the only next. Say to them, let's observe, think, discuss, do it. Is it in the paper record? That's the view of such. I think it's pathetic. Gone to universities, bright young people come out of brain dead, not knowing what's me. They think me peer reviews, etc. No, that's academia. And if post peer review, it means everybody will say for their proved it. An unintended consequence is that when new knowledge merges new scientific insight, they are never ever buried. We're blocking all new advances. Science are big answers. If you look at a breakthrough in science, almost always don't come from the center of that pressure, come from the fringe. I understand this world and people think of electrolytes. Don't come from within, come from outside the breaks. We're going to kill ourselves because stupidity.
So folks, basically, let me conclude with this. I think there's a beautiful saying from Luthan's, his famous textbook on organizational behavior, said, bridging the knowing-doing gap. And that is a challenge for us as managers. How do we bridge this knowing and doing gap? Traditionally, practitioners have neither had the time nor the desire to read and translate rigorous academic research, and academics have not had the time, desire, nor talent to write for practitioners. In other words, practitioners must take on more of a practitioner-scientist role, and academics must assume a more scientist-practitioner role. This movement to not only recognize but also do something about what Pfeffer and Sutton call the knowing-doing gap is a recent emerging movement towards evidence-based management. So how do we bridge that gap, and how do we do that in a manageable, reasonable way? So 6 standards of evidence, I think I'll share this with you. I think Yogi already gave some points which seem to overlap with this, but 6 standards of evidence is based on that same article, Evidence-Based Management by Robert Pfeffer and Sutton, which is an excellent HBR article, one of the earliest ones on this subject. And these are some standards for evidence-based management and some lessons for that. So thank you very much, folks, and over to Nidhi and AHRD team.
Very good, Keith. your comments on academic institutions and research is particularly useful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think our day is made. The practical insights from Yogi sir and how you have blended the theory and practice really made our day. I'm sure we have the blessings of Pareek Saab, so we could all have an intellectual treat in this 2 hours where we have heard the best of two of you. And I'm sure each one of us is delighted to hear that. I'm sure making sense of the evidence, the highlight of your talk is very reassuring because theory and practice, whenever I have served these two, I have always tried to see what is more commonsensical and what is more contextually right for the people around me, rather than following any kind of frameworks to a great extent, not getting biased with that. But I'm sure the kind of the chat messages which are coming are really an indication that we have been truly blessed by both of you for coming down and sharing and making really the sense of evidence-based management for all of us. We have got beautiful examples. We will like to have the presentations with us so that I'm sure the scholar community, not many of them have been able, a few of them have missed out for today. And I'm sure they'll also make meaning out of it and bring out more meaningful research work, because even I believe that a PhD document is very easy to make, but the purpose and the outcome of that particular document serves generations. And I actually believe that that is, PhD is one word where you can actually align both practitioner and theory. And what I enjoy being in academy is that, yeah, it's a place where both of them come together. So you find bright practitioners joining us, but they're not aware of the theoretical concepts. At the moment the theory starts putting in, they say, oh, wow, this is something that we know. And that is very reassuring and then very satisfying for us to know that the theory and practice are meeting. Somehow these are my thoughts. Blessed to have both of you. Thank you so much. And I now open it to all the dignitaries and guests. Open tribute session to Pareek Saab for the next 10 minutes, and then we move forward to the last part of the program. Open to you also.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Murthy. Can Dr. TV Rao, can you love to hear from you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Would love to hear some anecdotes that you shared with my father during one of, lot of work that you've done together.
No, nobody else can give the truthful memories the way Rao Saab speaks.
Yes.
No, I have put some on the YouTube, I think in the afternoon. So I think I don't want to take this time when so many people are there. So any of you are interested, in fact, I was sharing quite a bit about the books that we have written together and the entire story behind each of the books and so on. So I wouldn't take much time on since I have put pretty long videos on the YouTube today.
Okay.
But I like both the sessions. I think it is wonderful. It's very nice of Nidhi and team to have thought of a topic like this. As I was listening to both Yogi and Keith, I was also remembering Dr. Pareek. I think in his L&T lectures and public lectures, he used to prepare and he used to pick up themes like this and draw both from other fellow researchers as well as practice. So it's a great combination, and I'm very amused to see Yogi, a practitioner, talking like a scholar, and Keith, I think, drawing, an academician, drawing so much from his own experiences, from practices and so on. But I think both of them have scholarly presentations made, and it is a great tribute to Dr. Pareek. I don't have anything more to say. Anecdotes, we'll save it for a separate session.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nagat sir, would you like to add on?
Oh, thank you. It's, it's always a humbling moment every year this year when you talk about and, brings back memories. And I think I've talked often on many things that, my father, imbibed into us, and we tend to do things and then we realize that, okay, yeah, this was taught to us at a very young age. And then one of the things that he told me, he said, as a professional, he said, obviously he told us, be passionate about whatever you do. But I think more than that, he said, bring versatility into whatever you do, have other passions. And on my 18th birthday, he presented me the book, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, the famous Nobel Prize physicist. And he taught me to, learn from that book and told me to be versatile in various areas. So he would take pleasures in very little things in life. He'll travel, 100 kilometers just to pick up a small statue in, heavy rain, and he'll get a big kick out of it. And so he's taught me that, and that's what we try to, imbibe into our family in bringing, looking at various facets, being, enjoying little things in life, and doing many, many things in life besides being just profession. So that's what one of the things we still remember him for that. And obviously it's thank you so much for organizing this lecture on a yearly basis. It's a very, very humbling experience. Thank you.
Well, Mahapatra sir, if you would like to share a few of your observations.
Thank you, Nidhi. I just wanted to acknowledge Yogi Sriramji and Keith. I think very nice way to start the talk with acknowledging Udai. That's the best way. We say Guru Rama, Guru Vishnu, like that. That's without reciting that in their own way, they recite, they acknowledge Udai, and also the way they linked. I was listening to Keith. I'm listening to him after. Of course, I met in between. I was listening, and I met Yogi ji. I'm just saying the evolution, the acknowledgement. Also linking up. Keith, just for information, Professor Rao and me, in Gujarat Gas days, we did academic TV, you may remember. We got 4 university vice chancellors, Mr. Virani, and we wanted to do 1996, we wanted academic university together. 10 years back, same thing. This challenge continues. When you were saying Keith, and when Mr. Yogi was saying, TV, same thing. Every time I meet Yogi, I think he's an academician talking or a practitioner talking. And every time Keith, the way he brought in, I think that is the nicety of Udai. He'll give you the space to be yourself, but he'll also leave behind an insight. I think Anagat, thank you very much for saying he'll explore. All the way he came to Clark Amer. Yeah. I just said, Udai, I'll come to your place. No, Gopal, I'll come. I said, no, I'll come. No. He drove down. And I told, I don't know whether I told last time, Gauranga was there, he says, no, I have come to meet you. That greatness of a person, very, very rare. We learn about level 5 leadership. Udai symbolized that. TV, you, me, Udai, we did a lot of work on some clients. In one of the ONGC, I'll be specific. I was there, I was coordinating that. Udai was in my committee. Udai wrote two lines, each one is a pearl of wisdom. I was giving that example in some development center. I said, Professor Pareek, I understand, but this chief general managers, EDs will not understand. So Gopal, what do you want me to do? Can you believe the Guru? He's saying what? I said, Udai, can you please make it a little bit elaborate so that you can write your comments very well? And lo and behold, Udai does that. I can keep on telling stories. My acquaintance is very little. But what I want to tell back is keep the way. I think that is what Udai stood for. How do I become an academic and how do I give insight to practitioners? Keith, you demonstrated that. You were being authentic, you were being data-driven, but you are also giving your insights. And Yogi ji, I have told you every time I met you, through his concepts, he's also trying to tell us, don't forget, all our professionals evolved to these great stalwarts like Udai Pareek, TV Rao. Although I decided to retire as a personal manager, BK Mishra was my factory personal manager. I said, So thanks to Udai TV, HR today, many of us have become directors, general managers, all that. But have we forgotten the basics of the profession? Udai's contribution, TV's contribution, L&T, thank you, Yogi, for being there. You took us to these heights, but are we forgetting the basics? And I think, Nidhi, I must tell Academy of HRD, Dr. Pastonji, all of you, and Anagat being there, you are saying profession is still evolving. The physically Udai is not there, his soul is there. But I just want to acknowledge Yogiji and Keith, what you reinforced, that his philosophy is there, his sentiment. So with that gratitude, I want to just acknowledge both of you and Academy for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
If it's all right, I would also like to say something.
Sure, please welcome Karan.
And so obviously I heard the talks and the presentation, and it feels so nice, like to be able to hear such great things about my grandfather. And I was relatively young, you know, when he passed away, but I still have lots of fond memories of him. I was obviously very close to him. He taught me a lot of things, but I think more importantly, one thing that I like to say is that everyone knows him for his, you know, humble and kind nature. Everyone knows him for his hardworking and dedicated self, and the amount that he contributed to the field of, you know, human resource development. But I think most importantly for me, I know him as my grandfather, and that is something that I will always remember. Like, I will always look up to him as someone who I constantly want to learn from. But at the end of the day, he was a family member, and I do have a lot of memories, you know, regarding, you know, our connection and his time here, right? So one of the things that kind of comes to mind is so as kids, I've never been a picky eater per se, but whenever he used to come and visit home, he would feed me food, and instead of feeding me like just, you know, like a bite of roti with sabzi or roti with dal, he would mix everything, and he would call this whole thing combinations, right? So every time I would sit on the table, he would, like, you know, feed me like roti and dal both and say combination, and then feed it to me with like maybe some lasan ki chutney or something like that. And that kind of like sparks like joy in my mind, because if I could have one takeaway from that simple incident, it reminds me of a process in business. It's called agile or something like that, wherein you don't trust wherein you look at the result and don't look at the process. So that is something that I also learned in life, wherein like you shouldn't always worry about the process of going through things and worry too much about how you're going to do it. Like, experience it, and then think about whether you like it or not. And I think everyone does this in some way or the other. Like, if you don't like, you know, mutter or something, you will not want to try a particular dish, but kind of trust it, go with the process, and then make a judgment for yourself whether you want to continue with it or not, right? And I think another thing that my dad, just the example of you know, Baba walking in the rain just to kind of get a statue, that reminds me of another thing that I learned from him, was that taking simple pleasures from small things in life, right? And I think that's a huge thing, because I have friends who are, you know, like this generation, I'm not afraid to admit, we're a lot more materialistic about things and a lot more objective oriented people, as opposed to, you know, like a lot of other people that I know, right? You know, especially all of you. So we'll chase money, we'll chase, you know, a physical object that we want, or anything that is like big to achieve, right? But what I learned from him was that you should look at these small objectives in life, look at these small pleasures in life, and appreciate them. Like, if you wake up in the morning and have a nice hot cup of coffee, for example, then look at the joy that the cup of coffee brings you. And I try and do this in every single thing, you know, in my life. With that, like, if I make like a great dish to eat, then I have this habit of gloating also, wherein I'll just pat myself on the back and say, oh my God, I've done a great job. But it kind of helps me appreciate that moment so much that I never want to forget it, right? And this is something that I want to continue doing in my life. And I hope that, you know, these examples, and I'm sure, you know, all of you in your own way will remember Baba and kind of feed on these examples and these anecdotes and learn something a little bit more from them. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Karan. I'm sure indeed the legacy continues. Thank you. Yeah, I would be very happy if any one of our AHRD fellows could speak for a while before we move. Naresh Mehta Saab is here. I can see him. Rajanji is here. Any one of you would like to share your observations, your comments?
May I?
Hi.
Ji. Hi, Elisa.
Hi. My name is Lisa Thomas. I have been with the Academy many years ago. And my respect to all the professors, Dr. Rao, Keith, President G, and Dr. Udai Pareek, with whom I had interactions in my young age. Now due to the work from home possibility with United Nations, I am in India, so I have got this opportunity to be with you. So I just wanted to kind of give my tributes to Dr. Pareek in one particular specific reason. When I was doing my fellow program in human resources development, my topic was not a very typical human resources topic. I have chosen a topic on gender and human resources development practices, especially in the context of microcredit seeking rural poor women. And at the XLRI level and at the panel level, there have been quite a bit of discussion whether it is a human resource topic or not. And I think it has been finally approved as a human resources development topic because of Dr. Udai Pareek's and Dr. Rao's support. And in that context, I want to remember the contributions made by Dr. Rao and Dr. Pareek specifically in terms of human development. And I have heard many times they have been talking about human development. I worked in almost 32 countries and in 4 continents. Since then, I was in academy. But the tools, the simplistic tools of organizational development tools and research tools, which Dr. Pareek and Dr. Rao developed, has always guided me. So we talked quite a bit about the difference, the gap between practice and theory, and there is something which comes context in between. And when you are confused about the context, these tools always guide you. These tools always bring you back and give you the direction on how you go about dealing with it in the context and modifying it and bringing in innovation and continuous improvement. So I think like my basic lessons from academy always has given light to me. And I really kind of pay my tribute to Dr. Rao and my tribute to Dr. Pareek. Sorry, my respect to Dr. Rao and my tribute to Dr. Pareek in providing those kinds of guidance. And especially as a woman in working in different contexts, knowledge always is, kind of your strength is your knowledge. And you are always able to relate, go home, look at what is happening and listen to Dr. Rao's lessons, read the books of Pareek and tools, etc. always gave me confidence. I really want to acknowledge that, and I really want to contribute all my achievements to academy and all those professors who supported me. Thank you.
The greatest thing that I vividly remember is the extreme humility and the willingness to help anyone who came across and asked him for any help. And the way he explained to me and subsequently shared his papers on role negotiation technique, I'll always be grateful on a personal level as well. And T.V. Garu and Dr. Pareek, I mean, they, to my mind, they started first this practice of talking by, taking first name. For example, he always said, call me Udai, that is sufficient. So that was very nice because at that time I was very young and this was a refreshing experience that I used to have. Thank you.
Rajanji. So I move forward. Yeah. Yes, sir.
May I make a comment, Nidhi?
Yes, sir.
Very nice to see Lisa here, and I am inspired by her comment. I'm so happy that somebody who worked with UN remembers the kind of conceptualization we did for HRD. Dr. Pareek's life itself is a good symbol of working in different kind of settings. He started in education, then moved on to agriculture, AHRD, and also started the extension department there, and later moved on to small industries, extension training, entrepreneurship, and moved on to population studies in North Carolina. Then came to join the National Institute of Health Administration, went back to the university, then came to IIM Ahmedabad, where you apply all this knowledge in any sector you like, different sectors. So HRD to me today appears to be applicable everywhere. In fact, in 1993, when I wrote that book on HRD experiences, dealing with HRD at national level, many people in the corporate sector who were familiar with our work used to wonder, what is this HRD? I think today there is nothing that takes place on earth which does not have human. Everything is HRD. And Dr. Pareek's own life is symbolic of that. That is one of the reasons why I'm hoping and wishing Rajeshwari will come up with this his 100th year birth centenary memorial volume, which also talks of a biography of Dr. Pareek, of various sectors, how he worked, how he impacted. You talk of poverty eradication, he's into it. I think his article, even much before HRD term appeared, which we conceptualized in 74-75, but it's 1964 article in Journal of Social Issues is on poverty eradication, and then extension motivation concepts and so on. So I wish somebody is able to really put some of these things together, or I think this volume for his for 2025, we should probably celebrate this as a centenary year and so on. So I think it will be very nice. So our entire HRD conceptualization in corporate sector is only a small part of real HRD. Real HRD is like, I think what Lisa mentioned today. If you look at the girl child, for women, for people who are in poverty, or the Gandhian thought of a trustee, I'm just doing some work with Dan Foundation. I think it's very interesting how in the last 25 years they were able to lift up from working with 25 lakhs of families, lifted up 5 lakhs out of poverty. And these were our students from IIM Ahmedabad. So I think we will be able to celebrate with a lot more lessons in course of time with a kind of a biography. I think Rajeshwari is there on this. So Rajeshwari, I hope we will be able to put some of these things together. Thank you very much, Nidhi. I think this is a great job done.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we quickly move to the next part of the program. The last but not the least, the beautiful 2 awards that we are going to present today. Last year, we decided that the kind of work that the HRD scholars have done after the doctoral work has also been phenomenal. And they are all accomplished professionals and practitioners, academicians. So we marked the beginning by presenting the first award last year to Professor M.G. Joman, XLRI. And for this year, we invited nominations, and based on the nominations and the performance credit scores that our academic council applied upon, we would like Surbi ma'am to decide to announce the award for the fellow this year.
Yeah, I'm very happy to announce the name of Mr. Dev Prasad Chattopadhyay, who is the senior professor and HOD in HR.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much to all the respected dignitaries and the august audience on this platform. In fact, mine is, if you kindly allow me 1 minute to articulate, my alma mater, AHRD, has been the most loving and the most exciting phase of my academic career. I'm 68 years plus now. with Globsin Business School for 16 years, earlier 9 years in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. But the first 24 years was in industry, all through pharma, Merck Sharp and Dome, Organon, and finally in Hyderabad with Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. I can never ever forget the guidance I received from respected Dr. D.M. Pestonji sir. When I first came to the academy, Dr. K.K. Verma sir was around, followed by Professor Imon Ghosh sir, and then Dr. Rajashri Narendran madam, and now Dr. Nidhi madam. I had the privilege of meeting Dr. T.V. Rao sir, if you kindly remember, in Kolkata, in one of the meetings of National AHRD Network. So I owe my debt of gratitude to everyone in Academy of Human Resource Development. My thesis was a bit unconventional topic-wise. It was on spirituality in management. And specifically, the topic was impact of spiritual leadership on spiritual climate of teams. My revered guide was Dr. Ashish Pandey of IIT Bombay. Additionally, I got, the tutelage from Dr. Professor S.K. Chakraborty, the Doyen of Spirituality of IIM Kolkata. And he told me that, Debak Prasad, you please focus on the Rajarshi model of leadership. When I was unable to comprehend, he explained that it dovetails both the Raja, that is the king, and the Rishi, that is the sage. So Rajarshi model, and I took my work forward. Again, I owe my debt of gratitude to Academy of Human Resource Development for this, acknowledgement at an advanced stage of my career. Thank you ever so much. My regards and pranam to all. Thank you.
So at the moment, in this COVID times, we are presenting it virtually to you, sir, and we'll be soon dispatching it at your end.
Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you so much, sir.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you all. Thank you, madam. Pleasure.
Let's have a huge round of applause for him. I think that is something that we can do and create a virtual room out here. Congratulations, sir. Your work in spirituality and ethical leadership has been phenomenal. The papers that we went through, more than 22 research papers, which are in great refereed journals, international journals, have been phenomenal. The thesis that you did, as you mentioned, has also impacted the current business school, and a paper was launched. So heartiest congratulations to you, sir, and we look forward to your support to the budding scholars for Academy.
Thank you so much, madam. Any assistance from my part, I am always at your disposal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Pestonji is not with us at the moment. His network was not good, but he has conveyed his congrats. Thank you, sir.
Kindly convey my regards and pranams to him. Thank you. Thank you.
We now move forward to something that all AHRD scholars look up to. The long years of hard work that we put in ultimately has to come out, and we have to have the fellow with us. So if I'm not wrong, Dr. Rajeshwari, if you are there, we can have you, because Runa Maitra has done her thesis.
Dr. Nidhi, I think she is hanging around one entry inside. So.
She was here, she just dropped a message, but I'm sure Savita would check. So this year, the fellow award is being given to Miss Runa Maitra for the wonderful work, hard work she has put in, and the compilation of the doctoral thesis. So a huge round of applause to you, Runa. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
The topic of her thesis has been a study of interrelationship of corporate education to senior leadership and its impact on employee commitment. So heartiest congratulations for being awarded the fellow. Again, I would request Savita to display it virtually, because at the moment, that is what we can do. We are soon going to dispatch the fellow with you. And we would love to hear from you. What are your quick comments and the experience so far?
Thank you, Nidhi ma'am. I would definitely like to, first give my uh, gratitude to Dr. T.V. Rao, sir. I think we grew as HR professionals learning from him. And it was a great opportunity to be part of this beautiful academic experience which I have gone through. I would like to thank my guide, Dr. Rajeshwari Narendran. Definitely without her guidance, support, this is not have been possible. I have faced a lot of challenges in my journey, and I think she was always there. It's an opportunity to also thank Dr. Surbhi Purohit, because she was the first one who I met, and I kind of pursued that whether I can be her a student, but I think due to some circumstance we couldn't do, but she always encouraged me. And so I want to thank Dr. Surbhi Purohit as well. And I think that loads and loads of gratitude to all my friends, and a lot of them are already PhD scholars, some are in the journey. We had a great opportunity to learn from each other, because one thing I must say, AHRD enables all the experienced professionals to come forward and pursue their dream to be a researcher, and also contribute back to the HR community. So I'm extremely grateful for this entire journey you have allowed me. Keith sir, I would remember your classes, all the learnings, and today it was such a beautiful refresher. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Runa. Yeah.
I think I can start taking everyone's name, because so many memories, right now I'm having, but at the same time, I think Merlin helped me a lot in a step-by-step. Savita was very supportive. And I think a lot of you, if I'm not able to take your name, because honestly, I'm very nervous and happy that finally it is over. So, but at the same time, it's a beginning of another era, and I need everyone's blessing and support for future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Runa. Yeah. Rajeshwari ma'am is here. Would you like to share your experiences, ma'am, while the doctoral work has been completed by Runa?
Thank you, everyone. It was an excellent session. I think I would like to say first, thank you, Dr. Keith, for being, so simple, humble, straight, and what a great session to learn. And I definitely enjoyed what Yogi sir also spoke about, and how this beautiful journey had been for L&T, and that was all evident to see that. And I'm thankful that finally I landed in this session. When Dr. Rao was speaking about the book and talking about me, I don't know, I got removed, and then I was waiting, and so suddenly now I'm in after so much of request on the WhatsApp group. So I'm back, and I see that, Runa coming from so many facets of life, because when she was doing her doctoral work, she came with a lot of learning from the corporate sector already, and then she was turning into a practitioner. And her passion has made this beautiful work converted into this doctoral thesis, and I really feel proud that she has created something wonderful to carry on, and still there is a lot of scope on corporate education and leadership which can be taken forward. And I also resonate what the mental well-being as a challenge, what Dr. Bestenji was talking, and we are also working on it. And I am happy to share here that in Mohanlal Sukhadia University, after my stint at AHRD, I have established a behavioral lab, which is the third one in India, and it has lots and lots of work which is research based and evidence based, definitely. So I would love to see that how the behavioral lab comes, and definitely this inspiration is from Dr. Udai Pareek and nobody else in that way, because he is the one who instilled this kind of research, and the kind of support he has always given and inspired hundreds and thousands of people, including Dr. Rao being such an icon. who has helped us, and a wonderful journey it has been. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nidhi, for giving me this opportunity.
My pleasures. Mayurbhai, would you like to add on a few things? I'm very thankful that NHRD Ahmedabad chapter has wholeheartedly joined us today. Any last comments from you, sir, and then we close.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and nothing more to say. Great opportunity to learn from leaders, and I think it is the influence that leaders create. So I think thankful to Dr. TV Rao for bringing me in the loop of HR, and always taking lots and lots of learnings from him and a lot of other leaders. So I hope that NHRD and AHRD, they work more closely together and come up with some good programs. And thank you, Yogi ji and Dr. Keith. What a great session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayurbhai. Yeah, Narendra Agarwal Saab, if you would like to share a few things, Professor Agarwal.
Honestly, I must admit that at 4:50 my Zoom got disconnected and I could not connect it. I just talked to Gopal and he said the program is on, so I came back. It was such a joy. I was looking forward to listen to, of course, I listened to Yogi ji for about 20 minutes and I was looking forward to listen to Keith, but unfortunately I had to miss it. And it was such a joy to see so many of our friends being around there and the opportunity to pay our tribute to Professor Udai Pareek. We all learned so much from him, and he had played a very significant role in our growing up as a professional. It's a joy to see that AHRD continue to help us remind that we had such a great person like Professor Udai with us, who helped us to grow up as a professional in the field of OD. Thank you so much for all the efforts you are putting in.
Thank you. Yeah, Meenakshi ma'am and LS Murthy, I think two of our fellows, I would like your quick bites and then we close the day.
It's great privilege to be there and really compliment Dr. Nidhi, Rajesh Chandwani, Marilyn and Savita, just for us managing such huge actually event, getting the stalwarts coming and sharing. I was very fortunate, like 2019, I met Survi ma'am and got her signed book. In 1998, Professor Udai Pareek sir visited IPE. He had a good friend, Professor R.K. Mishra, and he came for a session from Udaipur. And I got a book signed from him. I'm a proud possession of both the books and met him. It's actually such a humble person. It was a privilege to have met him. Met the whole family now in the last 2 years. Thank you so much for the actually Professor TV Rao sir for have been actually propagating that a lot of our actually professional bodies haven't been actively pursuing or respecting the legends who have founded both NHRD or AHRD. There are so many actually forums now, whether People Matters, or SHRM, or many things, but together when we come, we miss that. So thank you so much. Actually, we all should be grateful to AHRD for bringing this together. Thank you so much, Dr. Nidhi.
Thank you, Murthy sir. Yeah, Meenakshi ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be at this platform, and AHRD has brought in so much of literature and knowledge that we have sort of taken across in our research work. I'd like to thank my guide, Dr. Rajeshwari, who is sort of hand-holding and sort of taking me forward to the final goal and destination. But I'd like to mention over here, by initial stages, I met Dr. TV Rao at his office, and he said, Meenakshi, it doesn't matter. We started at schools, and Dr. Udai Pareek and he had started from St. Lawrence, Lovedale. And then that's what sort of inspired me. I said, okay, being from a school and having 30 years of school experience, of course, a certain amount of administration too, but to start from there and to come to AHRD, meeting all of you and meeting stalwarts in the corporate sector is a pleasure for me to be part of AHRD. And this program where I continue to do my work post-retirement, and I am trying to put in my research work together and hoping that I shall finish it. And like Runa said, it is nostalgic. At the same time, the journey has definitely be wonderful for you. And I hope Ellis and I are able to finish as soon as possible. And many a times I get these little nudges from, Dr. Rajeshwari also nudges me and cajoles me. Come on, Meenakshi, finish it as soon as possible, because 90% of the work has been done. And I don't know, I think I need to just focus on it and get it across. So hopefully I should be able to complete my work. And that's thanks to AHRD to allow this hybrid method in which you are able to read and do your research at the same time, continue with your work. Thank you, AHRD. Thank you, Dr. TV Rao, Dr. Pestraji, if you're here. Wonderful to have you all here. Thank you, Dr. Keith, for that excellent presentation. Learned so much about evidence management, and some of it which we do at school as well. And Mr. Yogi as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, the kind of community that we are with, we can go on, and I'm sure it's a treat for all of us, but we'll have to respect the time. I would convey my deep regards to Yogi Shriram Sahab to join us and deliver this wonderful talk, spare this whole evening with us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you, Professor Keith. It was wonderful hearing to you. I had never had the opportunity to be in your class, but it was indeed a pleasure to be the student today. It was wonderful, sir. And nice to have your presentations and share. Professor Agarwal, if you have missed a bit, we will share the recording with you very soon. So don't bother much on that. I would like to thank, sir. I would like to thank Surbhi ma'am for being with us, honorable board member and guide for, she would come and do small workshops on the roles and instrumentations and designs, and it has a deep impact. So thank you, Surbhi ma'am, for being there. Intellectually, you've been helping the journey of AHRD into the tools and instruments in the great way. Thank you, Gopal Mahapatra, thank you, Deva Prasad ji, each one of you. And thank you, Anagat, and thank you, Karan, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Last but not the least, thank you, Merlin and Savita, without whom the work would have been incomplete. Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye. Have a good evening and a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks, Nidhi and academic team. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
I had
Thanks for
other
joining
commitment.
in.
I said minimum tribute to Udai is being here in spite of all other commitments. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, LS. Thank you. Bye. Merlin.
Bye, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, Mayur bhai. Thank you, Murthy Garu. Okay, Runa, congratulations.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Santanam sir is there. Santanam sir, can we see you?
Santanam sir has gone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Merlin. Thank you, Miss Savita. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Oh. Bye.
Bye-bye.